Dick Cheney has endorsed Kamala Harris. And this actually has more meaning than a lot of people think. I think a lot of people and a lot of liberals across the country probably see this and go, that's kind of gross. But it actually shows you what these parties are now, what they stand for, what they represent on the global stage, what they represent for America. And Caitlin Johnstone wrote a great piece on it. She says, one of Earth's most evil living beings, Dick Darth Vader Cheney. I don't know, Caitlin. Is he really living? When we say Cheney's living, it's a fake heart that's pumping and there's nanobots behind his eyeballs. I guess. Okay, I'll give that one to you. Has officially endorsed Kamala Harris. His daughter, Liz Cheney, by definition, spawn of Satan. Liz Cheney has also endorsed Kamala Harris. Here's a quote from Dick Cheney. In our nation's 248-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump. Now, you got to picture what Dick Cheney represents, okay? He represents just a corporate stranglehold on everyone's lives. He represents just endless bombing of other nations. He represents the destruction of the environment, the destruction of the world. So if he says Donald Trump is the greatest risk to all of that, that's the first positive thing I've ever heard about Donald Trump. Suddenly, Donald Trump sounds like a good choice, if you were to believe Dick Cheney. By the way, Donald Trump is not a good choice. But I'm just saying, like, the idea that this maniac is saying Trump is a risk to what Cheney had and lived for and represented, suddenly that sounds good. To continue from Cheney's quote, he says, as citizens, we each have a duty to put our country above partisanship to defend our Constitution. What? And let's remember that Cheney also violated all kinds of laws, international laws, domestic laws. So how is it he can say, oh, we need to defend the Constitution when he wasn't defending? When he was in power, he just violated all these laws. He got laws changed to allow his companies to violate laws. He also was one of the biggest to enrich themselves with the presidency. I realize he was vice president, but he was controlling things. So he was enriching himself with the presidency by being the head of Halliburton before being president and before being vice president, and then being vice president, controlling things and giving all the contracts to Halliburton, going to war in Iraq and giving all the contracts to Halliburton, continued to heavily enrich himself. So he basically laid the groundwork for what Donald Trump ultimately became, is a president that just enriches themselves with the president. You could argue that Cheney did it in a way that really threw all the chains off, all the slight regulation on doing that. Cheney threw it all away, tore it up, and then here you have Donald Trump taking advantage of the fact that all those regulations were torn up. To continue from the article, was a charter signatory to the notorious neocon think tank Project for the New American Century, PNAC. That's how the hype men would say it in the back of the stage during the PNAC conferences. PNAC! Every time Dick Cheney would get up there and say, welcome to the Project for the New American Century, he'd have 5 guys behind him with big gold chains going, PNAC! And as vice president, played a leading role in the George W. Bush administration's soaring warmongering, militarism, and authoritarianism, including, most famously, the invasion of Iraq. I mean, the invasion of Iraq was essentially writing the blueprint where Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, and a handful of others, Wolfowitz. So it was done by them. It might have been, George Bush might have been the face of it, but he didn't write the shit. It was Cheney and them. And of course, why were they writing it? Well, yes, to steal some oil, but the biggest thing is the petrodollar. And I know I apparently am the only one who can read things and knows this, that's doing YouTube commentary. No one else wants to say it, but you can't have Iraq, which dropped the petrodollar. You can't have Iraq pumping crazy amounts of oil, selling it outside of the dollar, and not have that impact the petrodollar, which is where the U.S. gets its power. So what do? You invade Iraq and kill 1 million people. Continue from the article. He has the blood of millions of people on his hands, and he should be living out the rest of his miserable life in a cage. Not even a large cage. I'm thinking like a 5x5 cage, like barely the size of his body. The Cheneys join a growing list of formerly Republican warmongers who are migrating to the Democratic Party. I wonder if it means that those Republican warmongers have seen the light and they care about humans and they care about people and they just completely changed human beings. And that's why they've migrated to the Democratic Party. Or could it be the Democratic Party is now so far to the right that it is now the party of Dick Cheney? Last month, hundreds of staffers who served under Republicans, George Bush, John McCain, Mitt Romney, served under them. It then says signed a letter, and I didn't want you to think that John McCain came up from the dead and signed a letter. But Republican staffers that served under Bush, McCain, and Romney signed a letter endorsing Harris, saying that re-electing President Trump would be a disaster for our nation, would be bad for the empire, because Donald Trump is not a good face. He's not a good CEO for America Inc. He makes America look bad because he says the quiet part loud, and there's a million reasons he makes the empire look bad, but they want to keep doing their pillaging without having somebody at the top of things that is so loud and in your face that it gets attention from the rest of the world and ruins the blueprint for a continued hegemony. In June of 2022, author Sarah Kinzier made the following predictions. This is a pretty impressive prediction. I hadn't known Sarah Kinzier, but pretty impressive prediction. She says, there is a new plan for our already broken two-party system. The plan is to have two parties. One, a batshit crazy MAGA party led by Trump or DeSantis that will bulldoze your rights. And the second will be a far-right, quote-unquote, respectable party led by Liz Cheney that will also bulldoze your rights. They will call the Cheney Party the Democrats and pretend that a creeping capitulation to a right-wing agenda is some kind of act of healing and bipartisanship. There is nothing that differentiates, this is not from her now, this is from me, nothing that differentiates what Dick Cheney stood for when he was vice president and what the Democrats are now. This is the point of that everyone should walk away from Dick Cheney's endorsement with this point. There is nothing, almost nothing, that differentiates what Dick Cheney and George Bush, W. Bush, stood for when they were in power and what the Democrats are now. Nothing. Even on the social issues, Dick Cheney was actually light on those when he was vice president. He ultimately endorsed gay marriage because, is it Liz Cheney is gay? One of the Cheney daughters is gay, and so therefore, I don't want to be against something that impacts me and my family, because he doesn't care about any other Americans. He just cares about himself and his family. Anyway, even on social issues, what Dick Cheney and George W. Bush stood for is now the Democratic Party. That's what everyone needs to walk away from with that understanding. To continue from Caitlin Johnston's article, this shift actually started several years ago. During the 2016 Trump campaign, a bunch of neocon warmongers switched from defending George W. Bush as a saint and decrying Obama as an Ayatollah lover, and began pivoting to endorse Hillary Clinton instead. After Trump won, this coalition between Democrats and Bush-era neocons grew even stronger with the creation of a new Democratic think tank, multiple new Democratic think tank projects led by Iran rape. Can't say that word on YouTube, right? Or can't possibly discuss RAPE. You get no one. They won't show your video to anyone. The Iraq R word neocons like Bill Kristol. We're seeing two warmongering oligarchic parties shoving the Overton window of acceptable opinion as far in the direction of imperialism, militarism, and tyranny as possible under the leadership of some of the very worst people alive. I mean, it feels like the transformation has been completed. The transformation of moving the Democratic Party into a centric Republican Party is done, and the Republican Party has now moved farther to the right. But honestly, on many issues, the Republican Party doesn't even know how to differentiate themselves from the Democratic Party. They don't know how to do it on big oil. They don't know how to do it on fracking. They don't know how to do it on capitalism and Wall Street. They don't know how to do it on tax cuts from the rich. They don't know how to do it on the CIA and the FBI and the intelligence state, the NSA. They don't know how to do it on topics of war and whether to go to war. They don't know how to do it on Israel. There's so many things that even currently the Republican Party doesn't know how to differentiate itself from the Democrats. So instead, they just claim Kamala Harris is a socialist. Which is one of the, like, honestly, if you read anything ever, it's one of the dumbest things ever said that Kamala Harris is a socialist. And part of the reason they say that is because they don't actually know how to differentiate themselves on all of those issues I just listed. Progressives who want healthcare and a ceasefire in Gaza are being dismissed and ignored while alliances are being made with the world's most blood-soaked imperialists. The Trump party against the Cheney party. And no matter who wins, the empire wins. I feel like the better way to say that is no matter who loses, the empire wins. I'm gonna deduct 1 point, Caitlin, on that one, because it's just funnier. It's more interesting to say no matter who loses, the empire wins. But anyway, this is why you gotta step away from the federal election. You gotta say you're voting for Jill Stein or Claudia de la Cruz or the Yard Rock. You've got to be a part of something else and be a part of building something else. And that's why I love bringing to you, the positive story. I love being here with you guys. And I love bringing to you the positive stories of those creating change on the ground in a variety of ways, because that's where this world will change, where and how this world will change, not by re-electing or electing just genocidal maniacs. That is not change. It's nothing. That's insanity to be a part of that. It's infuriating.